Om Shri Manjunathaya Namaha. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session on Sushruta Samhita Adhyayana. Without further delay, I would like to call upon Dr. Muridhar Sharma Sir, SDM COP, to take over the session. Welcome to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So after a gap of some 2 or 3 months, we continue with the whatever where we have stopped. Now the next we have completed 44 chapters. Now the 45th and 46th chapter of Sutrasthana, the last two chapters, they are quite huge in size and then quite important. And among them, the first is dravadravya vidhi vijnanam vidhi vidhi madhyayam vyakhyasyaamaha yathovacha bhagavan dhanvantarihi. अन्यम् आन्तरिक्षम् अनिर्देश्यरसम् अमृतं जीवनं तर्पणं धारणम् आश्वासजननं श्रम क्लम पिपासा मदमूर्च्छा तन्द्रा निद्रा दाह प्रशमनम् एकान्ततत्पथ्यतमं च. The water which is rain water which is flowing from the sky is considered to be the purest form of the water and the most suitable for the physiology of the body. Ekantata Pratyatamam. It's a Patya and maximum Patya, and it helps in maintenance of the life. Jivanam, Tarpanam, it enhances the physical activity, it supports the body functions, and it gives you a satisfaction and reduces the stress and strain and thirst also. So on. So the all that physiological requirement of the water can be very effectively met with the water from the natural source, that's rainwater. तदेव अवनिपतितम् अन्यतमं रसमुपलभ्यते. The water which is from the sky doesn't have any taste, cannot be appreciated, the taste cannot be appreciated. Whereas when it falls on the ground, due to the contact with the ground, it will have some taste as such. Sthana Visheshat, Nadi, Nada, Rasa, Sarasa, Tadaka, Vapi, Kupa, Chunti, Prasravada, Uddhida, Vikira, Kedara, Palvaladichu, Staneshu, Avasthitam, Idi. The water gets collected in different areas, different geographical zones, and based upon the physical character of that zone, they are named with the different names like Nadi, that's a flowing water in the river, and Nada is a smaller channel where the water can flow. Saras is a collection of the water in a pond, superficial pond. Tadaka is a deep pond. Vapi is a well. Kupa also is a form of well. Chunti is a sort of a covered well, which is often seen in the northern states as such. Prasravana is a free flowing water, so on. Now, the based upon that, तत्र लोहित कपिल पाण्डु नील पीत शुक्लेषु अवनिप्रदेशेषु मधुर अम्ल लवण कपितिक्त कषायानि यथासंख्यम् उदकानि सम्भवन्ति इत्येके भाष्यन्ते. Based upon the color and the physical property of the soil over the area, the water may have different tastes like the madhura amla lavana etc. Tattu na samyak, that attributing the taste to the water is not correct according to Sushruta. प्रतिव्यादीनाम् अन्योन्य अनुप्रवेशकृतः सलिलरसो भवति उत्कर्ष अपकर्षेण is not the taste of the water, but it's the taste of the combination of the Prithvi Mahabhuta and the water, and hence the depending upon the character of the soil, it's not the color of the soil which affects, like the character of the soil gives the typical taste to the water. And tatra sulakshana bhuvistayam bhumo amlam lavanam cha. If the soil has amla lavana guna, then water also would have the same. Amuguna bhuvistayam madhuram. If the soil has more of jalamaha bhuta guna, then it will be sweeter in taste. तेजोगुण भूयिष्ठायां कटुकं तिक्तं च वायुगुण भूयिष्ठायां कषायं आकाशगुण भूयिष्ठायां अव्यक्तरसम् अव्यक्तं हि आकाशम् इत्यतः तत् प्रधानम् अव्यक्तरसत्वात् तत्पेयम् अंतरिक्ष अलाभे. Now in a akashiya guna soil, that's a sand which doesn't have any other content, what we call as a pure soil, sand or glass sand, That in that condition, if the water is collected in such a situation, then it will be avyaktarasa. The taste will not be seen. Whereas in all the other sorts of the soils, the water may get the taste depending upon the soil contents. So that's simple. There will be soluble contents of the soil adding to the water, whereas in a typical silicon soil, there is no taste, and that kind of water would have avyaktarasa, and it is very close to the antariksha, the natural source. Tatra pradhanam avyaktarasatvat tatteyam antariksha alabhe. So if you do not have a source for antariksha jala, then the water which can be collected in a sandy soil area can be used as an alternative. Tatra antariksham chaturvidham. Now antariksha water, the rain water also is of four types. Tatra dharam, karam, tausharam, haimamiti. Tesham dhar. Now what are those dhara, kara? The exact meaning of that. Dharam iti patati iti dharam. When dhara bhi patati iti dharam. When there is a heavy rain and the water is flowing very heavily, that's a dhara. The water collected during that heavy rain is a dhara. And simple, during that kind of a heavy rain, there will be very lesser chance of pollution, because the whatever the soluble pollutants which are present in the air or atmosphere also cannot get dissolved in the water, and hence that water has a lesser chance of pollution if it is collected directly before it falls to the ground. Then Kara Varshopala. Kara is the hailstorm, pieces of consolidated water. Now, in these consolidated water conditions, there could be some needles of pollutant inside. See, whenever there is a hailstorm, the hailstorm is formed because there is some solid material in the atmosphere over which there will be consolidation, and hence that water may have certain contamination. Tausharam avashyayajam nishadaram. Taushara is the dew which is collected over cool surfaces like the leaves of plants in winter, and because of this, though the quantity of water is lesser, it's considered to be quite healthy. It is considered to be healthy and healthy for the plants, and may not be usable for the consumption by the human beings. तदेव संहत अवयवत्वेन स्फटिकशिला शकल सदृश अवयवं हिमं तद्धोम हेमं. When the water is presented in the form of a deep or hardened ice, as in case of the Himalaya, that's the Haima water or ice, consolidated ice, which can remain there for many months or many days as it, and then when it gets dissolved in summer, that becomes the source of water, and that's another source of that. Gangam Akasham Akashadhistan. Ganga is the water which is present in the cloud, and from the cloud itself, from the sky itself, before it comes into contact with the atmosphere, that's a Ganga Jala. Samudram Punaha Avani Adhishtanam. Samudra Jala is not only the sea, it's any of the water which is having contact with the soil and then remains in the soil, that's the samudra. So these are the four types of the water according to Sushruta. Tesham dharam pradhanam lagutvatam. Among them, the dhara jala, that's a rain, heavy rain, water collected during the heavy rain, is important because laghutpata, because it doesn't have any possible accumulation of the contaminants. Tat punah dvividam gangam samudram, that dhara again, when it comes to contact with the soil, it can be Ganga or Samudra. Ganga, which is directly collected from the above the environment. Samudram is when it is collected, when it is coming into contact with the soil and gets stored in the soil. Tatra Gangam Ashwayuje Masi Prasho Varshati. Ganga Jala also is quite important or quite pure in Ashwayuja Masa, because that's almost the end of the rainy season. In the beginning of the rainy season, there is still a chance of contamination of the water due to the presence of pollutants like dust in the atmosphere, but in the Ashwayuja Masa, that chance is lesser. At the end of the rainy season, last part of the rainy season, the water will be quite pure. Tayo, Dvayorapi Pariksham Kuvita. Now, it's not enough if you just collect the water. you have to test the water before you consume. And to test the water, the methods of testing used in Sushruta spirit would be Shagyodana Pindam Akutitam Avidattam Rajata Bhadinopahitam Varshati Deve Bahishkruvita. Now, if you keep a ball of this rice, cooked rice, shadi, and keep it for overnight, and if it doesn't get decayed, if it doesn't get any extra smell, of course that has to be kept in a silver vessel, then that kind of a water is considered to be pure. If the food, that bowl of rice gets either decayed or the smell changes, then that water cannot be collected. स यदि मुहूर्तं स्थितः तादृशेव भवति तदा गाङ्गं पतति इति अवगन्तव्यम्. So if the food doesn't get, that ball of rice doesn't get affected, then water can be considered as a pure or Ganga. And Varnanyatve Sikta Praklite Samudramiti Vidyata Tanna Upadeyam. If there is a discoloration, then it cannot be used for the food as such. Samudramapi Ashwaya Mase Grihitam Gangavad Bhoti. Even Samudra water, that's the water which is collected in the soil, which is accumulated in the soil, in Ashwaya Masa, that's the end of the rainy season, still it's a chance of having pure, and it's almost equivalent to the Ganga Jala, pure Jala. गांगम पुनः प्रधान तदुपादित आश्रये मासे शुचि शुक्ल वितत पट एकदेशच्युतम अथवा हर्म्यतल परिभ्रष्टम अन्येर्वा शुचिभिः भाजनैः गृहीतं सौवर्णे रजते मृण्मये वा पात्रे निदध्यात्. To collect the water, store the water, you have to select an area which is clean, and then and have spread a white clean cloth, and the cloth we would be used as a filter, and the water which is filtered through that cloth, rainwater which is filtered through that cloth, can be corrected, or the water which is falling on a clean roof of the house, harmya tala paribhrastam, that's the water which is falling from the roof of the house, we can also be collected if you maintain the cleanliness, and the water should be stored in a savarnam, gold or rajate or silver, or maybe earthen vessels. These are the vessels to store the water. Pate nidadhyata. Tata sarvakalam upayita. Tat sarvakalam upayita. Now, it's better to keep that rainwater stored for the whole year, your supply, your requirement as such, and use that. If it is not possible, then tasya alabhe bhaumam. In that, if you do not have that kind of a capacity to store the water, then you may use the water which is already accumulated, or what we call as groundwater, the water which is accumulated in the ground as such. Tatya akasha guna bahulam tat punah saptavidham. That groundwater is again of 7 types. They are kaupam, nadeyam, sarasam, tadagam, prastravanam, audbhidam, chauntyamiti. What do you mean by this chauntya? And I'll just come to that part. Uh, uh, the what we mean by that kaupa nadeya, I will show you that later. We'll come to that. Simple kaupa is the kupa, that's the well, the usual well, open well. Nadeyam is the river water. Sarasam and Tadaga, these are the two sorts of ponds. Sarasa is a relatively bigger pond. Tadaga is a smaller pond comparatively. Prasravanam is a flowing water. Flowing water is considered to be more healthy as it. Audbhidam is the water which is from the natural, fountains, natural fountains, water coming from that. Chaunti is a covered well. These are the possible these instruments or materials which are used for the storage of water. तत्र वर्षासु आंतरिक्षम अद्भुतम वा सेवेत महागुणत्वात्. In Varsha Ritu, it's better to use antariksha jala or Audbhida, that's the fountain water, because it's healthy as such. Sharadi sarvam prasannatvat. In Sharad Ritu, you may use the water from any other source, because during that period, the water would be somewhat clean and chances of contamination would be lesser. Hemante, in the Hemanta Rutu, Sarasam Tadagamba, the water which is accumulated in a pond, open pond, wide mouth pond, like what we call as a in Kannada we use the word kere and bagi. Kere, that's wider ones, where it's exposed to the sunlight. That's a better use. Vasante, in Vasanta Rutu, Kaupam Prastravanamava, the small well and the flowing waters. Grishma evam, in the Grishma Rutu also it's preferred as a Pravrushi Chauntyam Anahidastam Savam. In Pravrutu, Chaunti, that's the covered well, could be used for a source of water. Chaunti kind of things may not be seen quite frequently in our area here in the coastal area, but in the northern part of the country, you will see that the covered wells quite frequently. Kita Mutra Purisha Anda Shabakotha Pradushidam Trinaparnotkarayutam Kalusham Vishasayutam Yo Avada Heta Varshasu Pibe Dwapinavam Jalam Sabahya Rogan Prapniad Kshipramehoto. The water gets contaminated due to the either contamination with the excreta or insects, Kita, Mutra Purisha, Shava, the dead bodies, or decayed material, any of the decaying materials like Trinaparna, the grass or the leaves, and it also can be getting contaminated with the other poisonous. Bisha. During even that period, Shusha has mentioned about the Bisha. Now, of course, we have that industrial, how these produce these industrial outputs as such, which can produce the contamination or industrial contaminants as such. In this water, if you use them either for external use or for internal use, either you drink that water or if you use that for the external use, you may develop the diseases like any of that external or the systemic diseases can be produced. So water can be a source for the contaminated water can be a source for the diseases as such. तत्र यत् पत्मक शैबल हठ तृण पद्म पत्र प्रभृतिभिः अवच्छन्नं रवि शशि किरण अनिलैः नाभिजुष्टं गन्धवर्ण रसोपस्थितं तद्व्यापन्नम् इति विद्यात्. Even if you collect the water from the pond, if the pond shows the evidence of the water plants and the water is covered by a layer of these plants of the water or algae, greenish algae seen over the surface of the water, which prevents the water from getting exposed to the sunlight. Such a water or a water which has either smell or color can be considered as a weapon or affected or polluted and it should not be used. तस्य स्पर्श रूप रस गंध वीर्य विपाक दोषाः षट् सम्भवन्ति तत्र खरता पैथिल्यम् औष्ण्यं गन्धग्राहिता च स्पर्श दोषाः. When Panka Sikata Shaivala Bahula Varnata Rupa Doshaha, Vektarasata Rasadoshaha, Anishtagandata Gandhadoshaha, Tadu Viktam, Trishna, Gaurava, Shula, Kapaprasekan Apadeti, Sa Virya Doshaha, Tadu Viktam, Chira Vipachite, Vishtam Bhetiva, Sa Vipakadoshaha iti, Tayete Antarikshena Santi. The water from the contaminated water would have different types of the physical and as well as physiological impacts, and those are classified as the sparsha dosha, rupa dosha, rasa dosha, gandha dosha, virya, vipaka dosha. Sparsha dosha is as you touch and the feeling which you can feel as it when you touch the water, you may either feel that extreme salinity, what we call as the salinity, kharata, that salinity, Paichilya having that oily contents, other these dense contents or slimy contents. Aushnyam being either warm, dantagrahitacha. When you put into the mouth, you will feel that the teeth are stimulated, irritated. That's the sparsha dosha. Then having that color of either decayed material or dirt, or soil acid, or plant products acid, that's considered as rupa dosha. And a appreciable or perceptible taste in water is the rasa dosha. Anishta gandhata, the smell, a foul smell is the gandha dosha. And when you use this, it will produce a impairment of the digestion, or it cannot produce a proper physiological effect. It can produce either excess of thirst and the pain or kapha, etc., the cough and so on, that's the beta dosha. And it cannot get digested easily, can produce a wisdom, constipation, or abnormalities of the GIT, that's the vipaka dosha. And in antariksha jala, you do not have these issues. Now, from the present day's point of view, when you look at the quality of the water quality parameters, there are many, and most of the quite important quality parameters, which are now considered as a standard parameters for considering the source of the water, are the turbidity. So almost it is the same, but Sushruta has mentioned. The only thing is the language is different, and maybe you may have more detailed method of analyzing these individual chemicals, like, but whatever Sushruta has mentioned in terms of the source of water and how you can perceive from your own point of view, like the taste, smell, etc. That's quite good enough. But now you have a better method and more evolved methods, like assessing the turbid by turbidimetric method, solid by the gravimetric method, and total dissolved solid, electrical conductivity, pH, ammonia, sodium, potassium, etc. These are the criteria by which the water is assessed. And in the standard practice of classifying the water would be, the water is classified into five categories: A, B, C, D, E. The A character is for the drinking, and class B is considered as a outdoor or bathing. So A and B are used for the domestic uses, and the C is drinking water source with conventional treatment followed by disinfection. So a C source of water can be used only after a treatment. Without that, it should not be used. D and E are for the agricultural purposes, fish culture, or the irrigation. This is how water is classified, a standard method of classification. What do you mean by that? These classifications are the class 1, and you will have dissolved oxygen. Now, another quite important parameter would be the oxygen demand. In the oxygen demand, you have two forms of the oxygen demand: biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. Biological oxygen demand is due to the presence of microorganisms present in the water. Microorganisms, they need the oxygen, and hence they would consume that dissolved oxygen. So when there is a more of microorganism, the biological oxygen demand would be increased, and hence the dissolved oxygen level would be lesser. So in class 1, the oxygen, dissolved oxygen should be 7.5, which would have the least biological oxygen demand. Of course, biological oxygen demand can be reduced or complied with either by making that the oxygen dissolved in water better. Now, oxygen gets dissolved in water better if the water is exposed to the environment. A flowing water would always have a better oxygen dissolved, or now, as you see in our hospital, where if you use a fountain, like pump used for that pumping activity, which is to improve the oxygen saturation in water. Or you see the aquariums, you may see that stored oxygen or air, which is made to flow in the form of bubbles. These are the methods of improving the dissolved oxygen. Biological oxygen demand can be reduced by reducing the organisms, and that can be done by simple boiling. A boiling would be good enough. Exposure to the sunlight will be reducing the total number of microorganisms, and you have the other methods as such. But whereas the chemical oxygen demand is another very dangerous issue. Chemical oxygen demand is due to addition of chemicals from the laboratories, industries, and so on to the water, and this cannot be easily corrected, and it needs some specific process as such. And one of the major problems which we now see is majority of the water sources would have more of chemical oxygen demand than the biological oxygen demand. Whereas the older storage or older source of water would have maybe slightly increased biological oxygen demand, which can be easily corrected and can be made potable. The water can be used as a potable. Whereas the chemical oxygen demand is quite difficult to convert that water into a potable limit or acceptable limit. So that's the other issue. Then the other parameters by which we can categorize as class 1 to class 5 are the ammonia and the total phosphorus contents, by which the water can be classified as a class 1 or so on. where the WHO standards of consumable water, the water which can be consumed. These are the parameters of the WHO recommended contents. Like this is what we now consider as the consumable or potable water. To decide whether any water is potable or not, you need to assess, and if this comes in within these limits, the contents are within these limits, then it's considered as a potable WHO and FPA. Whereas in Indian standards, ISO has given a more specifications, and on paper the specifications of the Indian standard is much better, much higher than what we see as a WHO. And quite important, the parameters in Indian standards are more 25, and the last one is pesticides. Pesticides should be absent. And very interesting issue is if you now see any groundwater level anywhere, you cannot have pesticide free source of water. And once there is a pesticide present in the evidence of pesticides in the water, then that cannot be utilized, that cannot be easily filtered or separated. That's the real situation which we have. Now, another source of water. Now, of course, we use the water from the similar sources as mentioned in Sushila, but now you have another important source of water is the mineral water presented in the bottles. So, bottled water market and consumption of water has been considered as a fashion, and often it's also considered as a healthy practice, and the demand for that is increasing as it. Now, if you look at these, what we see in case of the bottled water, your so-called healthy water, mineral water. I use the word so-called specifically because it's one of the major source of the microplastic getting into the body. Of course, microplastic entering into the body, it could be from many the sources, and it's one of the serious concerns to the human race or living life in the world. So if at all there is going to be a prayer, that end of the life in this world, it can be due to the microplastics. And the microplastic concentration in every living being is increasing. It is included in the plants or animals, every source, fish is everywhere. The microplastic content of the body is increasing. And this is a study where you can see these microplastic levels in the human beings starting from the infants. It's microplastics are now seen even in the breast milk, and even in a newborn infant the levels are now increasing. In adults, of course, it's increasing, and it's proportionate to the industrialization. Asia, comparatively, the level of microplastics is slightly lesser than what you see in Europe as per the studies as such. Microplastics are one of the major sources of the illness. Initially, it was believed that microplastics are affecting the endocrine system. But now, if you look at the research papers coming on about the impact of the microplastics, every organ of the body is involved. And this interesting diagram I have collected from a review article which was published in 2019, and it's a now see it's a 3 years old publication. If you have a similar issue of 2022, again the total picture could be different. What you see in this diagram is a number of research articles presented which will be showing the impact on the different systems of the body by the microplastics. Nervous system, 171 articles published up to 2019, and kidney system 170, digestive and excretory system, the number is quite huge. And this placental barrier being crossed, 169 articles research articles. Over the skin, 122, respiratory system. So the important is that this is one of the microplastic is one of the major issue of study now, and maybe one of the major causes of the illness in future, and it will be a much more widespread pandemic than any other disease. So it is a very important issue of concern. All that the point is don't consider that mineral water as a source of health. Mineral water can be a source of illness rather. It's better to use any other open source of water, than the mineral water. So those who consider mineral water is a source of health, and then depending on the mineral water, that bottled water for every activity, now there is a need for concern. But of course, the market for mineral water is increasing, and the total culture is changing. So now that's the point where you need to highlight the value of what Susra has mentioned. Now, Sushra also has suggested about how to change or purify the water which has become contaminated. Decontamination of the water is another important aspect of our culture, Indian culture. Now, it's not only about Sushra. These are the methods used for thousands of years in India, and they had that clear idea like water can be source for the disease as well as that can be converted. That's the important issue which we now consider as a modern outlook. Many of the modern scientists often claim that the idea or invention of the organisms by Pasteur and the process of pasteurization has produced a change in the health conditions. But much before that, though the words used were different, such details and such methods were used in India, and the health of the people was maintained and rather improved. So there is a need to highlight this ancient knowledge now, and from that point of view, all this is quite important. Now, how to convert this or how to decontaminate is a Vyapanasya Agnikothanam, Surya Atapa Pratapanam, Tapta Ayapinda Sikata Lostranama Nirvapanam, Prasadanam Tekartavyam. Now, one method is heating of the water, by which the methods could be the best method is Surya Atapa Pratapanam, heating in sunlight. If you keep the water in sunlight till it becomes warm or hot, that itself is one of the best method of decontamination. Heat, the exposure to sunlight and the ultraviolet rays will kill all the germs. And when you keep it in the sunlight, the precipitation of insoluble materials would be easily occurring, like, and oxygen content, oxygen solution, dissolved oxygen also will improve. The other methods are Tattaya Pindasikata Dostranama, heated metal or heated these piece of stone, or maybe certain specific materials which are heated could be dipped in water, and by this you can have the same effects, that warming effect can be done. Or the others would be Naga, Champaka, Utpala, Patala, Pushpa, Prabhuti, Bija, Arivasanam. Specific flowers like Naga Champaka, Utpala, Patala flowers, they kept in water, can also be one of the methods of decontamination. Quite important. We'll have more discussion about these issues further. Having some plant products, adding over to the water, or using those plant materials for decontamination of the water is one of the major area where we can definitely contribute in the present day situation, because water contamination and decontamination is one of the very most significant aspect of the universal issues now, and that the our ancient highlight this information knowledge has to be highlighted and has to be brought back to the use, and from that point of view all these are quite critical. Then another is Savarne Rajate Tamre Kanse Manimaye Twa Pushpa Avatamsam Bhumeva Sugandhi Salilam Vibeta. Water kept in certain specific vessels like golden vessel or silver vessel or copper vessel or kansya or money, specific money is used for the water decontamination. These can be used for the water decontamination as such. Now, as far as the copper and silver vessels being used, and silver, the properties of silver and copper, they are now studied where, and large number of research articles are coming through about the use of copper and silver for decontamination of the water, and such things are now becoming also commercial interest. They are also now commercially presented, like copper vessels or silver and copper wires, so on. Such things are available in the market, but and they are considered again as a very new knowledge, but it's not a very new knowledge. Thousands of years ago in India, we had that kind of a culture. The present methods of water purification, now, thus Sushila has said, but we now have the methods of water purifications are either filtration, boiling, Solar purification, same thing, like it comes to almost the same level. Then the other filters, like another commonly used now in the market now, these kinds of things are changing like the fashion. Candles were earlier used quite frequently. Now they have become somewhat bit older techniques. You do not get them quite frequently in the market now. The use of candles. Some 10 years back, clay-based candles were quite popular for decontamination. Domestic water decontaminations was with that. Whereas the others like chlorination and iodine addition, these are now used in public water supply, these setup, public water setup like municipalities and so on, they use that chlorination. Distillation is another of the technique often used in laboratories. Then ultraviolet radiation. Now these days, the two important techniques which have quite become popular in the domestic level of water this purification would be either ultraviolet radiation or reverse osmosis. RO, reverse osmosis techniques are now becoming popular, but both these methods have their own limitations. They do not really produce physiologically perfect source of water, though they may reduce the chemical purification. But chemical decontamination can be better done by reverse osmosis than the UV radiation. So among the present days technologies, the reverse osmosis is considered to be quite efficient in reducing the chemical contamination, and the chemical contamination is the major this source of worry now than others. Then desalination, of course, copper water. These are the other methods which are often used for the water qualities or maintaining the water qualities, and is one of the global burning problem. Water contamination and water sanitation are the major important issues of the global issues, and WHO has having a greater interest in that. There is an international initiative water quality. Now I am presenting these issues simply because to say that there is a lot of concern about this area, and from our Ayurvedic point of view, we can contribute a lot. So from that point of view, to highlight our capacity, our potential to highlight, I am just putting these facts in. Now the source water quality facts as per the WHO quite important to highlight. But when I say that the water contamination is a burning problem, it's not only my opinion, it's a global opinion. That's what it's WHO says is 1 in 9 people worldwide is drinking water from unimproved or unsafe sources. 2.4 billion people live without any form of sanitation. Lack of sanitation is one of the most significant forms of water pollution. This is how the water pollution is looked at from the current point of view. 90% of the sewage in developing countries is discharged untreated directly into water. Now, when WHO says it's about the developing countries, in the developed countries, the situation is worse than that. They say 90% in developed countries, developing countries, whereas according to their concept, it looks like the sewage is separated in developed countries. But during that separation of the sewage, there is more source of contamination. There is a different source of contamination because that sewage processing is done by adding chemicals, and these chemicals would be adding to the water sources. So more than sewage, it is the chemicals which are contaminating the water sources in the developed Western countries, and that has resulted in the use of mineral water, and that mineral water itself is another of the burning problem. So this way there is a big vicious cycle of water contamination, and the only thing is there is a blame game. The blame game is the blame is put on the developed countries and ancient these practices, and are trying to market the newer technologies as the issue. So these are all the politics of the world, so I will not go into that part, but we should be sensitized about these issues, and wherever there is a possibility, we need to highlight these issues very powerfully. Then anyway, the industrial discharges are estimated to be 300 to 400 megatons of waste into water, and the agriculture. Now, another important is there is a blame game on agriculture also. The pesticides used in agriculture, which can be a major source of pollutants. Of course, in India, this is a big burning problem as and a reduction of about one third of the global biodiversity is estimated to be a consequence of the degradation of fresh water. This also is a very serious concern because of the water source contamination. It's not only the human beings who are affected, the whole ecosystem is affected. And reuse of wastewater in agriculture is important for livelihood, but is associated with the serious health risks. These are the important concern areas of the globe about the water quality issue, and in these areas, definitely we can contribute a lot. Now, as per the global picture, among the overall water pollution levels uh, in 1970, 2000, and predicted what we is 2050. Now, these dense colors show the area, and the status of India, as per the prediction, global prediction, is very poor. It's not improving by 2050. You have more of water pollution, polluted water here as it. Above the other countries, it's not an important concern for us. So this is the real situation, and we need to be concerned about that. From the our policy point of view, there is a National Water Informatics Center, which is an initiative started from the government point of view. And if you have a website, you can see this URL of the website. I have just put that dashboard copy of the same website, which gives you a clear time picture, the real time picture of the water contamination levels of different sources and different rivers assets. So there is a good effort from that point of view, where the people could be sensitized about the situation around them, so that at least some remedial measures could be taken up. So I will not go into much of the detail. Main purpose of showing this issue is we from the medical field point of view should be aware of these developments, and wherever there is a possibility of adding something, contributing something, we should be making use of that. That's the main purpose of showing these issues as such. The status of river pollution in India, the data is again quite hazardous, quite as such. The rivers in distress, the contamination rivers as such, as per our government data. Now, these data presented by the government may not be realistic. It could be much more. The real situation could be much more worse than that. But this is the situation now in India, and hence we should be concerned about that. Now, there are a huge number of laws existing in India to prevent and control water pollution. So, there is a need to be sensitized about this issue also. And these acts are, of course, they are there. How much these acts are effective, that's the question. So, there is a need to implement these acts effectively, and there is a role for every citizen in the implementing of these acts. So I will not go into the details of what these contents of the acts and so on. My purpose is totally to sensitize about the issues. Now we come back to the text as such. व्यापन्नं वर्जयेत् नित्यं तोयं यच्च अपि अनार्तवं दोषसञ्जनं ह्येतत् नादधीत अहितं तु तत् व्यापन्नं मुदकं यस्तु पिबति इह अप्रसादितं क्षयतुं पाण्डुरोगं च त्वग्दोषम् अविपागतां श्वासकाशप्रतिष्याय शूलगुल्मोदराणि च अन्यान् वा विषम अन्नोगान् प्राप्नुयात् Achirena Saha. Now, the weapon, the affected polluted water should be avoided, and even the water, rainwater, which has rained in unseasonal rains. Unseasonal rains water also should not be collected. So, rainwater would have its qualities only when it is it's collected in the proper season. If you use these contaminated water, the possible diseases according to Sushvara, Shwayatu, edema cancer, renal complications, Pandurogam anemia, Tvagdosham Vaipagatam, skin disorders, and gastrointestinal tract disorders, respiratory disorders, Shwasakasa, Pratishaya, Shura Gulmodaranita, abdominal pathologies, or even death, fatal complications can occur. Now, Sushruta has suggested about the methods of prasadana, decontamination. Materials used for them are, the main suggestions are Tatra, Kataka, Gomedaka, Bisa, Bisagranthi, Shaivala, Mula Ustrani, Mukta Manishteti. Very important. Seven types of materials were used in Sushra's period to decontaminate, and they are Kataka. Now I'll come to that part like Kataka Bija. That's the Strychnos potatorum seed, then Gomedaka, the money which is used in the jewels. Now we have a practice of using jewels, these precious stones over the jewels, and these precious stones would have a physiological benefits. Now generally, people believe that precious stones would have some benefit over their horoscope or the celestial bodies. Well, true or not, we are not going to that part. But many of the precious stones would have a definite physiological values. These are proved now. Then Bisagranthi is the plant lotus root knot, the lotus root acid, and Shaivala is a caterpillar. That's partly algae, a different sort of algae, and of course vastra, simple cloth can be used. Muktamani also can be used as a the materials used as a. Among them, Stignus potatorum, that's Kataka bija, for water purification. Lots of researches are done, and you'll have plenty of publications. I have just put in few of the peer-reviewed publications, reference of the reviewed publications. If at all you are interested, you can go through these articles. And one of the promising area of the future, use of the Kataka bija for water purification, and the results are really appreciable. And it can be, as I said, it can be one of the possible solution for the future. Only the thing is, you need to develop a method which can be suitable for the present need, but which can be scaled up to the level which of the requirement. So that's all the point. So there is a promising area which need to be developed. Then globally, it's not only in India. Globally, it's one of the area is a use of plants for water treatment. I have collected some important this summary of different articles and the different varieties of the plants used globally for water purification. Some of them, of course, I can give you the biological names of these botanical names of these plants. Some of them we cannot make out the equivalent Sanskrit name. So again, some of them are definitely used in India also. From Ayurvedic point of view, this is not only from Ayurvedic point of view. The plants which are used and publications are there about use of different plants for water purification, and it is one of the major areas. The world has understood that what the next level or maybe the possible future of water purification would be by making use of the plants, because now they have understood that the methods of like reverse osmosis or ultraviolet rays or so on, whatever that advanced technological methods, they are not going to solve the problem, and hence there is a lot of attention about the plant sources being used for water treatment, and these are certain of those plants which are already studied to a certain extent, and there is always an issue of how to scale up these to the level of requirement. So maybe Acacia nilotica, Acacia seal, Acacia tortilis, Acacia, many plants of the Acacia group, Albizia, Shirisha is as such, then Euclea, Plumbago zelanica citrata, Moringa, the Shigru, Jethropa, these are now used at different levels. Still, none of them have come to a level where it can be a real practical use in the real situations. Now, Sushruta comes back to we come back to the Sushruta, where after the purification, water has to be stored, and before you store, the methods, technologies used in the older methods, it's quite interesting. Sushruta has mentioned about the methods of storing water would be Falakam, Trastakam, Munjavalaya, Udakamanjika, Shikyam Jeti. Now, these are the different varieties of vessels or maybe methods of storage of water which can keep the water pure. Now, these diagrams which I have collected, they are from different sources of Indian literature, different varieties of the textbooks, and from there they have given you, maybe these may look like imaginary, but you can make out the principles. Future, that Trastaka is method where the water could be flowing at three levels, could be filtered at three levels, and then it's stored in a well, like maybe a pond. Then Munjavalaya is a modified method of a network of the plant roots, and Udakamanjika also. Now these are imaginary pictures, but it shows about the possible technology. You get the description of these assets in Dhalanika. Falaka is a Shalmari Kasta Adi Belichidam. Falaka is the Shalmari Kasta use a vessel prepared by Shalmari Falaka. Trastakam Ashtastra Danda Traya Sanyoga. That's the same. The three dandas, three rods used for the filtration. Munja Valaya, Munja Viberachita Valaya Karaha. A vessel like structure with Munja. ಉದಕಮಂಜಿಕ ಆಕಾಶಾಂತರಾಲೆ ನಿರಂತರ ನಿಯತ ವೇತ್ರ ವೇಣ್ವಾದಿ ವಿರಚಿತ ವೇತ್ರ ಗೃಹಾದಿ ಅಭಿಧಾನ. So, of course, we do not know exactly what you mean by these varieties of the methods of storage. Uh, Maybe if you go more into the details of the literature, we may get more information, and whether these models can be used in the present day situation or not, what could be reduced, that will be one of major areas of concern. So I'm not in a position to give exactly like whether they will be useful or not and what's the exact thing. But whatever I have collected is from the available sources. Anyway, there is a need to look at these issues more importantly. So that's one part. We will continue with this in the next session, the Shiti Karana and so on in the next session. With this, we will conclude today. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer and then conclude. There is one question. Sushruta mentions Saptapinda Sikata loss and Ruapana, but from Rashtrastra perspective, such a process are told for Shodhana of mineral drugs, where mineral drug would be become brittle and physical chemical impurities from mineral would get leaked into liquid medium. So how is this process using treated stool? Now that Taptapinda or heated material dipped in liquid used in Rasashastra is a different concept, and the Taptapinda used for water purification is a different concept. Now, when you use these in the Rashastra, you dip them in different solutions. It's different, maybe these Swarasa or Kashaya and so on. So, idea is totally different. When it is dipped in water, it could be like some components of that material, that chikata or so on, may even be added to water, and that addition of that substance can be neutralized whatever the already contaminants present in the water. So it could be that way neutralization of the contaminants could be, and at the other part it also gets heated, the physical properties of getting heated and reducing the possible physiological contamination, this biochemical contamination, biological contamination also could be the other way. Anyway, more detailed study is needed. So I don't say any definite issues there, but there is a possibility that it could be from that point of view. So we need to have more detailed study on that part. That's it. Huh? Okay, right. There are no more questions. So with this, we will conclude today. Thank you, sir.